This is Call the Psychiatrist. I'm Dr. David Handley.
And I'm Dr. Abby Snavely.
On this episode, a listener's therapist has started rubbing her back when she's upset, and she wonders if this is normal. And then we return to the topic of vacations. A listener is upset by their therapist's upcoming vacation and is thinking of not going back to the office. Beth's therapist just got back from vacation, and they're having a hard time getting reconnected. And finally, a therapist wonders how we prioritize our patients after a vacation.
Say you like me, you better count the ways.
Listening to this podcast does not mean we have a doctor-patient relationship. Our intention is to educate and entertain you. Nothing we say is intended or recommended as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own physician or other qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical questions or conditions. We'll call this first listener Molly.
After a year, my therapist has started putting their hand on my shoulder and rubbing my back when I get upset. The first time they did this, they asked me if it was okay. Kind of stunned, I said, yes. It's comforting, but also feel like I'm getting too close to my therapist. I've never heard of any therapy model that incorporates physical contact. Is this normal? What are your thoughts? I'd appreciate you keeping my name off the air.
It looks like a red flag day at the beach.
I'm saying, is this normal? No. No. But we can give more thoughts around that.
Yeah. And I think it's good that Molly's thinking about it. She's reflecting on it.
Right.
I think that's 100% correct to do that. But yeah, I agree.
But
not usual.
It's creepy. Doesn't the red flag say creepy on it? Creepy AF, as the kids would say. I don't know. I got a lot.
Well, good. Where do you want to start?
Well, I guess just in the fact that I think this is, we talk about it all the time on the show, but this is a boundary crossing and maybe a boundary violation because it doesn't sound like Molly is really given the chance to say no, or she feels like she can't say no. And I think that physical touch and this type of boundary crossing can be some of the most confusing and most damaging for a therapeutic relationship. Because I think that things are supposed to remain talked about. But, so many of our patients are traumatized, especially women are very likely to have been, assaulted, things like that. I guess, and men too. I think it's particularly egregious type of violation that would be pretty hard to come back from.
I thought it was interesting that given that the therapist asked for consent, it was almost like they knew it was a boundary crossing.
I think that's right.
And there's also, I was trying to come up with a scenario where if it happened once, I tried to create a scenario where I can imagine maybe it happened in a different kind of outcome, but clearly this is a pattern here. I think she even says, the first time it happened. So implying
right.
This is
whenever they get upset. And so I guess we can think about this both from Molly's perspective and then maybe try to put ourselves in the therapist's shoes. But, I do think this is creepy. I mean, Molly says getting too close. I don't know if that is only physically, but also emotionally. But it's also the therapist could be sending a signal that this is too much, that they don't know how to soothe the person with words or they can't contain it. And so they have to act it out, right? If I were Molly, I might be afraid to get upset or bring up really emotionally charged material as a way of warding off these unwanted, I know they're not technically advances, but things that could seem like advances. And it sounds like, it's the rubbing of the back, but, the overtones of this could obviously be sexual. And maybe that's just a more blunt way of explaining why I think it's such a big deal.
Well, but I think in your general principle, I agree with, which is it just simply gets in the way of Molly's treatment. Because now this is having to be paid attention to instead of what she actually needs. And you're right. If the therapist is so overwhelmed that they can't offer comfort with words, then that's an additional problem. That if this is this recurrent pattern, that they seem to be ill-equipped, I guess, to manage her. So now she's having to take care of them.
Right. Take care of them, manage herself in a different way. I think that it is inappropriate. We can talk about other forms of touch, but in a session, especially only in response to that kind of expression of emotion, I just can't think of a time that it would be appropriate.
Yeah. Setting is everything because I don't want us to sound, obviously touch is important. Humans respond to touch. We're social animals. It's very comforting. But there's a power differential that favors the therapist, and that differential can be exploited I mean, so we're both trained as physicians. We've touched people in all their parts. Even as a psychiatrist, if I'm working in a hospital setting, someone's, in a hospital bed or even in an outpatient medical clinic setting, yeah, like I might squeeze a person's hand or, offer support, squeezing a shoulder or hugging a family member or something like that. But when you're in these long-term therapy sessions, it's just not okay. And, we talked about hugs. Like this has come up a lot, which is a different kind of touch, right? I look back, I think we've talked about it episodes 4, 16, and 21. And in 21, that was even called Hug from My Therapist. But again, those settings, even within a session, was so different because this is being triggered by her being upset, like you had said earlier.
I think that you're right, that setting is everything. And, there might be a touch of the hand at a particularly poignant moment. But again, I think in a long-term kind of treatment, I need my words and my presence and, my ability to just be with them to be enough.
Yeah, I was trying to think of any other exceptions. Was there any model where it would happen? There's the emotional freedom technique. Those are those tapping people.
Right.
Sometimes the MDR therapist will do some tapping. But even in those, it might be a demonstration of tapping. It might be just to demonstrate the pressure that's going to be applied or maybe a location. Right. But again, that's in a discussion about, I'm going to tap your chin or something like that.
Well, and that here's why. And,
right.
Well, and even how the therapist phrased it, it's weird, right? To ask if it's okay. Again, I don't think it really is set up so that the patient can say no. But also, it's the therapist saying this is optional, right? And I'm like, you should not be touching somebody if you don't need to, right? That is weird. And then I'm aware, though not in any depth, about somatic experiencing therapy, which is performed by psychotherapists, but other types of allied health professionals too. And it's my understanding that model does allow for touch, but again, it's in very specific circumstances. And again, I think not as a means of comfort.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so there's no way this therapist is following a model.
There's also one last one, rebirthing therapy, which has been outlawed in Colorado for at least over 20 years. But yeah, I mean, we get into some quackery there.
So no, this is not normal. I mean, Molly finds it comforting, which I'm sure is confusing. But I think it has to stop. I'm trying to think of a way to bring it up or get out of it. It seems like it would be very hard to say, I know I said this was okay, but I really don't want to be touched. But maybe there's a way through this if the therapist has been helpful in other ways. But I guess the other thing we know about boundary violations is that they tend to build. And if someone is willing to cross a boundary in one area, it makes it much more likely that they're going to be willing to cross it in another. So I think, proceed with caution is kind of my bottom line. Do you have any more to say about that?
I think that's a great summary. I think there's serious creeper vibes here, and you're going to have to talk about it if you're going to stay together.
Yeah.
In the words of the Georgia Satellites, don't give me no lies and keep your hands to yourself.
Dancing just you and me. Cha-cha-cha.
We have a review from Ellie. I could listen to Dave and Abby all day. I'm a new therapist, and I appreciate that I learn from them each episode. I like the way they thoughtfully work through problems. You can't underestimate how it feels to confirm your own intuition and say, aha, I'm on the right track. Thanks for leading the way. Ellie, nobody in my life says they could listen to me all day.
I'm like, that makes one of us. Like there's, but yeah, it's what a high compliment. So thank you.
Cha-cha-cha, cha-cha-cha-cha-cha.
This question comes from PE. Thanks so much for a refreshing podcast on all issues therapy related. I have an issue which I would love for you guys to address. I've been seeing an analytically trained psychologist for about a year and a half. I've never been bothered by the times he went on vacation. Recently, he told me he's taking a 2-week vacation. I felt unusually triggered by this, in part because it's unusual for him to take leave at this time of the year. I know that my reaction is irrational and is likely transferential. The feeling it has triggered is an insecurity about relying on people and asking for help. Deep down, I have this fear that people can only give small amounts of support towards me, that if I ask for more, I am asking for too much, and that I'm being a pest. I feel so upset by his vacation that I'm tempted to not return to therapy when he comes back, and without even warning him. Please help me. The feeling is actually unbearable.
Well, Dave, it's vacation time again, right? I mean, here we are.
This might be an annual topic, which I think is, makes sense.
It does. It's a big deal.
Yeah, because the overarching theme of all these tends to be about abandonment, or it's about how do I manage the dependency that was developed or is developing or that I have.
Yeah.
Well, P says that their reaction is irrational and they're unusually triggered. And this is one of those times when I think we can use that maxim, that when a reaction seems outsized for a situation, it probably has something to do with the past, something historical.
Yes.
And it sounds like P's
suffer from remembrances.
Yeah. And it sounds like P is already onto that interpretation. So
yeah, right. That there's an emotional logic to this, a historical logic, right? And that these are real feelings, maybe misapplied. But yeah, the irrational also caught my attention as something I'd like to undo for them.
It sounds like P's feeling more regressed because this one feels more unpredictable. Past vacations were okay, but this is not the usual pattern.
More time has passed since the therapist's last vacation, right? For this patient, she's deeper in the treatment, which could mean she's more regressed. The therapist and the patient have been working together 1.5 years, but it sounds like the patient set up some expectations about what was typical or regular for the therapist, right? But at most, this is only the second summer they've been together. So to say like they never do this, or this is the pattern, or this is what I'm expecting, I guess one interpretation might be that PE has come to trust the therapist more and trust that the therapist will be there, right? And so if there's like some implicit expectation of time between vacations or what's happening, but then it could be a setup for disappointment, but it's not clear to me that the therapist is really necessarily doing something so far outside of what they usually do.
Yeah, that was my other piece of advice for PE is to look at what's been happening in the previous 4 or 6 weeks, because it's very likely that something's going on in the therapy right now that's making this feel harder. And that, you have maybe become more dependent, just as part of the treatment, not
in a good way.
Yeah,
right?
in a good way. Yeah, not
yeah.
That's not a negative or a criticism, but that there's some content that you've gotten into that has just made you feel more vulnerable, and it makes you feel more like I need more help. And then, as P was saying earlier, that's when people tend to abandon me. Is right when I ask for more. So the very thing that P has been so worried about is now coming true. Like, so here I need someone even more. People are limited in their capacity to help. And just like I feared, they're going to take off.
Right. And so again, to say that I think these are good things, right? It's uncomfortable, as PE says, unbearable, but to enter a phase where you can want things and need things from your therapist is good. I mean, having some of your defenses broken down a little bit, hopefully before they get built back up, also good, right? Because starting 1.5 years ago, if PE is a relatively put together person, she may not have put that many expectations, right? Or may have been easier to hold the expectations back. But that's also like keeping a distance is a defense that, may be getting broken down. And as they get closer and the dependency needs get more expressed and PE is looking more deeply into probably her past and how it's influencing the present, of course it's going to hurt more, right? This, in all ways, it's very likely that the work has just become more important.
Yeah, and P brings up that this is probably about the transference. I agree.
Yeah.
But I think what's so important is that so yes, it is, and then the very thing, or one of the reasons you're in therapy, is happening right now.
Yes.
Between you and your therapist.
Right.
Like this is the climax of the narrative of many narrative,
it may be an iterative process.
Yeah,
right?
maybe
it might get here again, but yes.
Right.
But
I'm just excited. It's like, I'm kind of excited for you because it's actually happening. And so the ability to observe it and appreciate it and feel it and talk about it, this is actually, this is very illustrative of how the process is supposed to work. Right. And so if you were to shut it down now, you would be doing such a disservice to yourself. If you were the hero of the story, we have to see, what happens, how the hero transforms.
I love that. And own it. It's likely transferential. Yes. This is an emotional response. Yes. But, it's not just about the vacation being unusual. It's not just because of something the therapist did. I think this announcement, may have tipped PE over into this other place, feeling more anxious and worried. But even if it was right at the same time that the vacation was taken last year, my hunch is this would still be a painful process.
Yeah, I think so.
PE, you got to go back, right? There's this fantasy that you can avoid the hurt by not going back. And I totally understand that. But the second part you mentioned is not warning the therapist, which to me hints at a desire to hurt the therapist back, to balance the scales. But if you can hurt him by not coming back, that also means you know he cares about you. And I think this whole thing, the emotions, the thoughts around it, the temptation into acting it out or behavior is all so rich. I think that if you can make it through this, it's actually, like Dave said, a really good and exciting time for your treatment.
Yeah. You not going back will make you feel better for like 2 seconds because it'll put you in the power differential will be in your favor, like you said. But yeah, you're going to be punished even more.
Yeah. And you have no chance of making it better. And then these feelings are going to continue to be repeated in other relationships in your life, whether it's with a therapist or a loved one, or the alternative is just never getting close to anybody ever again too. So I don't know.
Which doesn't
Staying
sound
in
great.
therapy seems like the best one to me.
Yeah. Good luck and let us know how it goes.
Yeah. Thanks.
This question comes from Beth.
I have complex PTSD and have been seeing my therapist twice weekly for 7 years. We've been having some difficulty reconnecting since she returned from a 2-week summer vacation. I am worried she will leave again, and I am afraid of appearing too attached. I am also scared because this relationship means more to me than it does to her. I have been ruminating about my therapist and my attachment, and it is driving me crazy. I want desperately to get back to our normal relationship and rhythm. I have attended sessions, but they are strained. It's like we barely know each other. I am so afraid to admit to her that I missed her because I don't want to make things worse. I would love to hear what you do to get your clients back to feeling safe after a rupture or break.
Yeah, there's obviously some overlap with P's situation that we just talked about. But here, I wanted to focus, or I think it'll be easy to focus on the dependency that Beth is feeling, that seems to be what's making her so uncomfortable. And I thought I wanted to start with that phrase that she's afraid of appearing too attached. And I'll just say, Beth, you're attached. You're not too attached. It's okay to have the feelings that you're having. It's not abnormal. But I get that it feels extremely vulnerable to have this kind of dependency.
Right.
And then she's worried about being judged by the therapist, or if she
and
says
making things worse.
Yeah, she's in a bit of a bind there, right? Because the distance that you're feeling is your way of trying to prevent you from feeling hurt, right? That she could leave you, she could abandon you, you could feel hurt. So you have her at you're holding her with an outstretched arm to protect yourself from that.
But it hurts.
I think the fantasy is that if the therapist only knew how important that she is to Beth, that she would be so repelled by her. That she'll be repelled by the dependency and she'll leave and she'll never come back. After 7 years, I'd have to really question, like, are there any indicators that she's going to bail right now?
Right.
I kind of think the therapist probably cares about Beth.
I would think so. And I bet there's been, for the therapist's sake and for Beth's, quite frankly, but I hope there's been other vacations.
Right.
The first break. And that part of, again, very normal that the relationship means more to Beth than it does the therapist. Maybe, I get that. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I don't know that that's the right way. I don't know that it's a helpful way to think about it.
Well, I don't like the phrasing because I read it like she's implying.
It's not more, it's different.
It's different because she's implying that she doesn't mean anything to the therapist, which I don't buy that. I think it's just saying that she is aware of the power imbalance.
Right. And that adds to the pain.
Yeah. Because when we're talking about separations and vacation, you don't want it to mean as much to the therapist, because otherwise your therapist can't be dependent on you because you would then have to take care of the therapist when you went on vacation. Like, you don't want them like calling you on vacation or when you're with your friends or family. Right. To reassure your therapist that you're okay. Right.
Right.
That would be creepy. There would be another boundary crossing. So the separation shouldn't mean the same to each of you.
I think that's right. And of course, it's going to matter, as you hinted at earlier, who announced it and who, I guess, is forcing the break. I know there's that very old school idea of taking vacation at the same time as the therapist, but you know what? That still puts the power in the therapist's hands, right? It's not like they're comparing calendars. I think admitting to the therapist that you missed her is going to feel extremely vulnerable, but I think then it gets the discussion started because you want to get things back on track. And I understand that. But the truth is the vacation, the 2 weeks, the time after it has all happened. So something has already changed from before the vacation, right? Including that Beth's had all these thoughts and feelings that she hasn't disclosed. She may have, communicated them in other ways. And so some of it that is contributing to the distance may be the withholding of that information. And, just kind of realizing that this has happened and it hurt and it was a thing and it's still a thing, I think is the first step to getting through it and at least getting back into a similar flow. But to me, this is probably, if it can be talked about, it may be actually a very important piece of their work together as an example and touchstone of getting through that pain and trying to resolve it.
Yeah, when you mentioned omission, I wondered, this may not apply to Beth, but I wondered if she had even been asked about the vacation. Like, did it affect you? And was she just overly compliant and just say, oh, it was fine? Like she was too embarrassed to talk about how it actually impacted her. Because I think, I experienced that with patients, where you're having to dig a bit more because they don't want you to know that it was important. And yet there's these other things are starting to go sideways or they're acting out. Maybe they're missing.
And it's a hard position too, right? Because then you feel like I feel like some weird caricature, insisting that this vacation must have missed something, based on their behavior. It's not just because my vacation always means something, but if the person is defended against it or can't see it, or, maybe it's just too embarrassed, like you sort of can't, I don't know, browbeat somebody into announcing it. Like that's just like, it's not how it works. If it's not available to be worked with, it's not available.
Yeah, you can't, right. You can't keep digging for it. Because what I was thinking is the feeling that Beth is experiencing, obviously the therapist should be feeling that too.
Right.
She may be waiting for Beth to bring it up, especially if she's more analytically oriented. I might be inclined to go digging for the source. But again, you can only go so far. You might say, like, does it have anything to do with this? And if you get shut down, it's like, okay, I'll wait and see what happens. Anyway, I would just be curious more from Beth if maybe the therapist kind of gave some signals that it's okay to talk about this, but like she's, again.
Well, and that's a good point, because that's if I've just started working with someone and it's early in our relationship and I haven't taken, very many vacations, then I am more likely to ask about it when I get back, because I'm truly curious, but also as kind of a piece of education that this is something that I'm interested in hearing about. Right? Yeah.
All things are on the table. We can talk about anything, including if you're mad at me for going on vacation, if you were worried that my flight was going to get shot down, or,
Right. Like, what are your fantasies? What did you think? How did it feel? But again, after 7 years, I would be surprised if this hasn't come up. And I guess if it hasn't, then I could see how Beth is in a bind, and we don't know the orientation of this therapist, but it is going to matter. And I guess the other part that I can relate to is that it is hard to come back, and I can understand not wanting to re-engage until she's really ready. But it sounds like enough time has passed and things kind of couldn't go back to normal. And I can only think that the distance and the resentment is going to build.
If the therapist has already provided some opportunity, the therapist may or may not try again. So I think Beth, I think you're going to have to disclose these feelings.
Like, no matter how much time it is, right? If it's still on your mind, then it's not going to go away on its own.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Good luck. Tell us how it goes, how it went. Sounds like you are in a really good, committed relationship with this therapist. And I really do hope that you can get back on track.
And this final question comes from Llewellyn. When you take an entire week off, it's not physically possible to reschedule every client's missed session. How do you decide to which of your clients you will offer a makeup session? What are the particular factors you consider? Who gets consideration? So I think this is a great bookend to the topic.
Yeah.
Llewellyn probably has clients like PE and Beth who are dreading a break, or where she's feeling that they're going to be uncomfortable with their dependency right now. So I think it's great to try to identify those people that might be at higher risk of having a setback.
It does depend, though, like we got into with Beth, is it a setback, right? I don't know that someone having a hard time with it is necessarily a reason, but it could be. I as a therapist, I'm never going to inflict pain or suffering or make things harder on my patient than I have to. And so, yeah, I think, is somebody having a setback? Are they at a particular critical juncture, either in their life or their therapy? Those people might get prioritized. But I also think it comes down to what sort of practice you have. Some of my patients have a weekly or standing appointment times, and some people don't. And so I guess, as Llewellyn is pointing out, there's only going to be a certain number of open slots in a week. And so some of it may come down to acuity, like we mentioned, and some also may come down to flexibility, right? If someone has rearranged their whole work and life schedule to come at 4:30 on Thursdays, it's probably not going to cross my mind very practically to just be like, do you want to come at 11 on Tuesday? I mean, I don't know.
No, I think that the breaks don't have to be a bad thing, of course. Like it sometimes it's actually opens things up in an interesting way, because you're no longer talking about a hypothetical loss. You actually have a loss, and that can do what it's doing for PE that we were talking about above. But I guess part of it, though, also depends on what she means by makeup. Like, I don't know if she was saying this is in addition to normal office hours. Like if she's saying you would open up other times to people, because I don't necessarily do that.
To me, that feels like then it's not a vacation. Right? Like I want to take a week off and not come back and work twice as much just to get the same number of people into 1 week that could have been in 2.
Yeah, I can think of people where I might do that, but it would be very unusual. Like it would be a very small number. But I don't know if that's what she means by makeup or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. And I also think that even if the therapist or she decides to extend her hours or offer more time, I think that something a therapist needs to be thinking about too is making sure that by offering that flexibility, you're not setting yourself up for resentment, right? If you are coming in earlier or staying later because you are feeling guilty about taking time off or something like that, I think that would be something to look at with your own therapist. So some of it was, what's the motivation for the makeup session, both for you and for the patient?
Yeah, and we touched on this, I think, in that last vacation episode, that we early on in our careers would often feel very guilty, that we weren't doing enough, and it was so hard to get away, and that took some time and experience to get past that. I think even, and I'm not over analyzing this, I don't think, but I think even the use of the word makeup appointment is interesting to me. It's almost like I'm making it up to you. Like
I didn't give you something you deserved, so I have to make it up to you. Instead of saying, I need and have earned this vacation, and it's important to myself to have time away from my practice so I can come back and be at the top of my game, or however you want to put it, when I come back. Right?
Yeah. I don't think you have to think about it as if you were harming people by taking the time away. And we always say, time is usually on our side in therapy. And so as scary as it can feel, it's not, like I say, it's not always damaging.
No.
As long as everybody's okay talking about it, like talking about before the break.
It's an opportunity, but you got to seize the opportunity.
So one thing I do, back to stratifying people, I think a lot of that is laying the groundwork ahead of time. And I think we talked about this maybe with Beth's question. You just let people know that it's okay to talk about this. And it can be a very brief conversation, but when you put it out there, I think it'll be in that brief conversation, you're going to have a better idea of who's going to struggle. Because the other thing is, people really surprise you sometimes. Like, there's certain people you're like, oh, this is going to be really tough. And then they're completely fine.
They're like, God, it was great for a break. I mean, maybe that's the overcorrection, but if that's their overt feeling, I'm not going to doubt it.
Yeah. As it turns out, I don't need you, and I saved some money. I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Oh, never mind. I bought some clothes and went out to dinner instead of seeing you. That seems fine.
Right.
Sometimes it's worth the trade-off.
So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add?
I think, you just have to think about the motivations and who it's for, and do your best, and realizing that is going to be okay if everybody can talk about it, even if it's not perfect.
All right. Well, thanks, Llewellyn. And thank everybody for listening, and all of you that submitted questions. As always, we love getting your feedback in the form of emails or reviews. You can send us an email or leave an audio message at our website, callthepsychiatrist.com. You can also email us directly at callthepsychiatrist@gmail.com. DMs are open on Instagram and Facebook at Call the Psychiatrist, where you can chat with me on Threads. And most importantly, tell someone about the show so we can grow. Take care.
Bye. And B says, that it, I don't know what the B is.